So I was just thinking, like, it would be fun to talk about things we're playing with or we've been focusing on a lot or seeing it been really effective, like just in practice,
Yeah.
Um, I mean, I have some things that I've been, really been focusing attention on for students that has been really interesting. I'm sure you have recent stuff that you really like to play with or,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
anything tip of your tongue that you want to hop into that you've been really playing with in the training room?
I mean, yeah. So one of the things we've been doing a lot of is this idea of a conditionality. So, fulfilling of conditions as they relate to searching for outcomes. And we've been creating games where you have to create the condition for as long as possible. So we've been removing some of the win conditions and just creating a continuous condition, or we call playable conditions. Playable is where where the game continues as long as this thing is met, and we try
Mhm.
to keep it going no matter how crazy the position looks or what changes occur. And that's been fantastic for the guys. And then,
Interesting.
yeah, I mean, the typical example that, we've talked about in the past is using line holding. So let's imagine I play a game where I go from feet to knees and then I hold the line of the knee as long as I possibly can without progressing beyond it. And then the player's win condition would be something like getting inside position back or making the top player fall over. So as long as I stay on my feet and I never let inside position get back and I just stay at the knees and I hold you down, it continues until that condition is broken.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. That has been like my first game every day. I feel like I've been playing with that more and more, which is always interesting, dude. I feel like when we talk, we're like playing with similar stuff ish, within a deviation of it. Is there certain situations where you like that? Because I've been playing with it with everywhere, standing, like
Yeah,
every,
every engagement, standing
everything.
guarded, pinning.
Yeah.
We've been really exploring inside position in general and trying to take the scope of that simple idea and spread it out. So typically it's discussed as just being in between, let's say, the arms in a front facing manner or the legs in a front facing manner. But we've been exploring it in lateral facing situations, all fours, top player, try to keep the inside position between knees and elbows, try to fill it with anything you can. So we've
Mhm.
been doing a lot of playable condition games with inside position too, like all fours, uh, you know, standing stuff. So yeah, it's good.
Mhm. Yeah, that's cool because like just trying to spread theory across different, parts of engagement is obviously super effective for us as a coach to help them along. I've been doing a very similar thing where, inside position, but rather than that, just like, these couple key pockets that we're trying to fight to control. So we'll play a lot of games where it's, fight to get behind the knee or between the thigh and the torso or the elbow and the
Yeah,
torso or the ear and the shoulder. We want to occupy that space. And I've been using that as sort of like a little bit of a universal theory that they can use in most situations.
for sure, for sure.
If you're getting fucked up, people are in your spaces there, so the game is all about that. So we'll play a lot of interesting things, just upholding certain zones even, not yeah, that's something I've really liked though, because I find it just opens their eyes, let's say.
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
my
no,
thing I find.
agreed. I feel like there's this relationship with the new student and that condition. So the longer they're able to maintain and explore that space, the more stuff they find.
Mhm.
Because if you notice at first, I mean, one of the reasons I like to kind of mix and match with new players is because the exchange is so quick. So with a new player, they can't even hold the spot. Let's imagine we're going to start them in mount with double underhooks, and their job is to connect one of the arms to the head. Well,
Mhm.
a lot of times they lose the elbow before they even get a chance to do that. So instead, playing games where their main focus is just to stay under the elbows as like the first game, and so they can really start to understand if I can stay under this position for extended periods of time, I have more opportunities to, let's say, connect one of the arms to the head. So
Mhm.
enhancing our students' skill there, I think, like in a continuous playable condition, really transfers over to their ability to create specific other conditions within that space. So,
Right. You know what? So I've been playing with something. I'd love to see if you've played with it where you've thought, I'm doing so much focus on stance, the main, like from a guarded scenario, in the
okay,
sense
okay,
that for me as a bottom player, I've been playing lots of games where we'll give our bottom player whatever configurations we want to sort of emphasize that day.
okay,
Maybe it's more of a Dalahiva or a single like that, whatever it is, right? And I've been playing a lot of games where the bottom player's goal is just to control the stance in the sense that deny the top player from ever getting to double knees down and deny the top player from completely freeing their legs of any attachment. And just that as a foundational game for like new players has really helped them figure out guard and off balancing because they're like, oh man, this guy's trying to get down to both knees. What can I do to simply just knock that knee get off the floor? And it's been really interesting to just focus on sort of the stance or maybe like alignment in that sense, or thinking of the position has taught them so much about the guard engagement because they also don't let people just completely disengage from their guard,
For
right?
sure.
And it's like more and more I've just been playing a lot of games in the guard scenario, especially that I feel have been really effective just on that premise because they're doing a lot of the other little like micro fights, just focus on this big, easy to understand picture. Top player wins if they're double knees down, chest facing me, or if they can disengage the legs and plates are like outside loose. That's been a recent thing we've been using for like all open guard sets. It's been really fun. Have you
Well,
thoughts?
no,
Thing?
y- yes, we actually have, but I'm curious to just on your understanding of something real quick. Why would you not want the top player to go double knees down?
Yes. So exactly. We won't leave it forever. It's more so of I use it as a way to help our athletes understand that they can control the range, right? We don't have to
Okay.
accept double knees down until we want a double knees down. Or, just so because for me, when we're playing these games, a lot of it is going to be focused on trying to reinforce like quality connections that they can
Okay.
use to determine where their partner can move. So it's within that scope. And then usually we'll stack expanded goals beyond that, where now that condition is removed and you have more substantial tasks for both the top and bottom player.
Now, in that game where you have the top player start standing, what if they just they just drop to their knees standing there, like they just fucking fall down, like boom? Is that an issue for that condition for you?
For me, no, because you'll
How
see
are you?
people do that in like matches. I feel like sometimes like, hey, I was forced to stand because they off balance me, and this guy wants to immediately drop back down to both knees, right? So for me, I'm thinking of it is if that's the scenario I wanted to create, keeping you up because it plays my game or whatever, trying to, I would say that is what we've been using for.
For them to drop?
No, for the bottom player, just to understand that, like, hey, we want to control where the fight goes because if this guy can choose to drop down to both knees at any time, you're going to lose a certain subset of sort of the ways that you like to play your open guard engagements, whether it's underneath guards or things like that. So
Okay.
we've been using it to sort of help them with that, if that makes
Okay.
sense.
Yeah, I see what you mean. I was just curious about the idea. Part of the way we develop our constraints is by trying to understand the central theme that builds the whole concept of why we act in one way versus another as running as a thread through everything we do. And ours is immobility as being the achievable thing. So
Mm,
I wouldn't like the way that we structured. I mean, the reason I'm asking is I'm curious of what effects that
yeah,
had because if I were teaching a bottom player how to control the fight, I would want the bottom player to bring the top player closer to the floor. So, and I have a reason for that actually, beyond immobilization. But the idea is the more immobility we can put in our opponent's system, the more controllable they become. So we think of it as getting someone closer to the floor makes them more manageable. So if
mhm,
we take someone from their feet to their knees, they become less mobile, more manageable. If they go from their knees to their hips, now they've fallen down, man, they're much more manageable. Bottom player can become top player or go behind. If they're double knees down and bottom player is able to put top player in their hands, they become that much more vulnerable to being immobilized. If you can put them on their elbows, bottom player can either get up or go behind, which is in our system, the ultimate goal is for the bottom player to either become the top player or get behind, right?
100%.
Outside of threat being constant, because threat is always woven into all the exchanges. Threat being uh, under the threat of submission.
Mhm. Yeah. And that see how it's interesting because you sort of like it one thing that we've talked about in the past is like, hey, when it comes down to building games and stuff like that, so much of it ties into like you as the coach and your central theory of grappling,
Right.
right? What do we prioritize? What do we always see? And like, how do we want to bring that to our students' attention? Because it's interesting for me, like those stance games, I'll play the inverse too. Top player wins if they can go from being all the way down to the floor to finally
Getting
get
all the way to their feet.
sensation, playing back out, going to
Yeah, yeah.
line. like, so it's
We do the
been
same one.
it's been so good just for the connections. I find like now they like for brand new guys, like, wow, you can play guard like pretty quick because you understand range, right? Which I think sometimes you can
Well,
just like think of guard as I'm on bottom and they're somewhere, right? But no, like
right.
they're sliding or they're here or they're past my hip or in front of my hip.
Well, I just talked about this with Steve on the podcast is that, he was talking about fundamentals, and I was trying to tell him that fundamentals aren't moves or positions. There's no such thing as a fundamental position. There's no such thing as a fundamental move. They're only fundamental functions. So the idea is that a guard performs a function, and that function of what the guard does is what is where the fundamental aspect of it lies. So all guards manage distance. And the only way that we can effectively manage distance from a guarded situation is through making and maintaining connections. So having a student understand that their guard, the purpose of their guard is to use to control distance through making and maintaining connections, no matter what the orientation of the body is the foundation of what's happening. So in the foundations program, creating games where the bottom player gets to experience using their connections, making and maintaining them to specifically control distances, definitely makes them better at all guards because that is the
Mhm.
central function of all guards. And doing something interesting like that, like you just suggested, where you start low and have the top player get back to their feet, but having the bottom player use their connections to deny that, that's fucking fantastic. Like, we do this all the time. So we're in a cycle
Mhm.
right now with breaking and back taking for the bottom player, where we start any type of entanglement from the bottom where both players are seated, or even any type of gripping in position where both players are seated. The attacking player has to break and back take, but all the defending player has to do is get to both feet. So if they're able to get to both feet, even if the guy gets behind you, it's a loss. If
Yep.
top player gets to both feet, even if you're entangled and there's no threat present, it's a loss. So trying to really teach our students to use our connections to hold the top player to the floor.
Yeah. And I love like, one of my favorite things about coaching is how can I get them to participate in this grappling engagement like the right way with like the least, just in looking at the big shape of like, man, if they go from here to, just feet on the floor, we've lost.
Right.
It's very interesting how we can scale that to all your learners probably, right? I'm
Oh, for
sure,
sure.
that's my favorite thing is when it's that broad to the room, I can then go dial it in here or there or, with each individual athlete. Is that something you've been doing more of, you find? Or
Oh, you mean deal going from a general
yeah,
teaching to
because like,
specifics?
I'm just thinking because like of games like that I like because they move broad enough in, where I'm pointing the room's attention for a room, but I can go over to, hey, Greg, list really for you
Yes.
attention to this, right? Are you playing with that more the individualized sort of attunement?
Well, so I've always done that. I'm gonna shut these
Mhm.
blinds so I can see clearly it's reflecting off my face. But no, I've always been like very focused on individuals because I believe that true skill development at the ultimately is specific to each person. We only use the general class as a way to teach people how to start engaging in behavior. So can we give a student an intention? That's too dark. What the fuck? Uh, we, I have
It's
this.
too sultry in here,
I
dog.
know. I know. Jesus. Uh, can we give a student an intention based on some foundational feature of how we play the game? And then can we use that to help them grow skill? And as they grow skill, can we use that to focus more specifically on what they need? So that's kind of how I
Mhm.
think about it. Like I tell all my guys that the foundations class is literally how to play the game. That's what you're
Yep.
learning. And you're also learning how to be intentional while playing the game. And then once you can play the game at a base level, me top, bottom, all that bullshit, you understand how to intend to do something and you can do what you intend to do. Then we can start being very specific to each person because now you
Mhm.
have that foundational piece. I can play and I can be intentional. And now it
Yep.
becomes easy to deal with each individual as they're facing these problems, as we're creating tasks for them to help solve these problems.
Mhm.
Anyway, that's the way I think about it, right? I think about it
Yeah.
as a layering process.
Yeah, no, that's great. If you were to think of in like your average room, how many of your athletes do you end up giving their own individual sort of points of attention
All
or maybe constraint?
So once they make the transition, so really what I look for is I look for people that should be doing more training. Uh, let's imagine you have, two major groups. You have the 2 day a week guys who kind of come and go as they please, and the people who come once a week, twice a week, 3 times a week, every now and then.
Mhm,
And I'll leave them be. Then you have the people who start to transition to men. They're steady 4 day weekers. And even, let's say they just only do the foundations. They don't do the all levels yet. That's when I start talking to individuals. Once I see that 4 day a week consistency, now we can
mhm,
start seeing the effect the practice is having on their abilities. And then it becomes
mhm.
more easy for me as a coach to clearly see why they're having success and failures. And then I start talking to them
Right.
because you have to remember at first we have to control for the things that are typical in all skill development situations: consistency, focus of effort, things like that. If that stuff
Mhm.
isn't taken care of, it's almost hard to affect an individual because the
Yep.
problem might just be that motherfucker didn't show up enough, you know? So
Mhm.
no matter what we tell them, we can't really affect them. So, uh,
Yes. So you're basically just looking for when that athlete sort of shows you that they've tipped over into like an engaged learner on their own,
that's
you can sort of
exactly
see
right.
that tipping point. And that's like, I know for me, that's like probably what I think my foundations is being all about and the way we run like our sessions is just to get you to know the enough jujitsu that now you want to get good at things
Yes.
because you
Yes.
can read the map. I think sometimes we can lose that if we go too deep. It's like, man, but they just need to see the whole game so they can figure out how they want to play it.
Yeah. Do you feel like you're able to do that well? Like take students from initial interest to deeper interest to specific student?
So for me, I would say I can get people to the point where now when they come up to me with questions, their particular things, I'm noticing
Nice.
I really want to try to funnel people more here. And when I hear that, I'm like, sick. Because you
Yes.
know that there's places to funnel people and you can sort of think of that. So we've been doing a pretty good job of helping like even your dad who comes in 3 times a week, eventually think that way, which I love. That's super powerful, create the engaged learner because all of like, in most schools or clubs, like all the top guys are the guys who started taking their learning in their own hands, right? Or a
Agreed.
little bit, right? Like
100%.
you're probably self-directed a lot of the time. I know for me, like
From start to
12 of my
finish.
18 years are me on my, well, like me with a remote, mentor or whatever, but still it's like all the best guys I know did that little bit. We tipped them over. So, but the easiest way to get people exploring it is to show them the broad, right? So then
Yeah.
they can dive deep on their own.
For sure. That's really what I was talking to Steve recently on this recent podcast I did. And I think that the only type of learning is self-learning. I really don't. So I don't see myself as like a teacher in the traditional sense. Like I'm going to jam this information into you. You must remember what I say. I consider myself a guide, right? I create the opportunity for practice to happen and I try to focus it so that if you engage with it, you're going to get something out of it. But ultimately, I'm giving you the tools of engagement. I'm giving you an
Mhm.
opportunity to learn. And I'm teaching you how to go about the learning process so that even if I didn't show up and let's say the class ran as it would, you would still be able to learn something. Um, I agree with you. I think the only type of learning is self learning, and teaching our students how to engage in that process. I think is our central job. That's what we do.
Right. Yeah. And like that's why, more and more it's interesting in the way I coach is I used to be way more specific, even in my creation of practice activities, knowing that I want it to be live and whatever. It's just fascinating. If I think back to like a year and a half or so ago, it's like, man, a lot of my games were regressive in nature,
Okay.
starting here, working back, like to teach an idea. Whereas now I notice my games are less finite in trying to create a particular type of technical outcome and
Yeah.
more about trying to foster a style of play. And this is the big
Okay.
thing I've been really thinking about in my like way to approach my practice plans. I want loose passing to be the skill we develop, but it's not leg drags I want you to develop. I want you to learn fighting connections, footwork, how to pin from a north south position effectively, because those are some of the things that will allow you to be like a loose passer.
Yeah.
And that's something I've been thinking about a lot more in like how I design activities. Because in the beginning, it was very much how can I make this one solution emerge, right? And I'm
Yeah.
sure lots of
Yep.
people sort of start there because it's the easiest adaptation from being very prescriptive already.
One
Is
hundred
how
percent.
can I, you know, make this here. But now I'm realizing I'm like, I'm almost way the other way, which is
Yeah.
fascinating, but it's been way more effective.
No, I
Like,
love to
I'll,
hear that evolution. That this so you I don't think you asked me, but someone asked me a while back, they were like, "What's the first mistake you made?" And I was like, trying to funnel people into moves because I didn't know how
yeah,
else to use it. That's how I thought it was used. And then the
mhm.
more I go about it, the more nebulous isn't the right word, but the more spread out, the more general I let the behavior be. I don't care where it goes as long as it goes towards effectiveness. So that's really cool to hear that you've come to a similar conclusion.
Yeah, and it's just like, it makes sense, you know, like, and obviously we all know it makes sense, but it's just a way more effective practice because, like, I was thinking, like, man, I used to spend a session maybe segmenting a knee cut into different component battles, right? Whereas I could have just been focusing on the universal battles that are good for that style of passing, you know, pressure
Right.
passing or whatever, or, you know, whatever we want to try and categorize it as this way, you know, like, that's what my biggest theme. I'm not sure, like, how do you think of when you're crafting like your practices, right? I
Yeah.
think of styles of play a lot. It's like my main thing now is I create activities to to you know highlight a style of play. Hey, the games we play here will sort of lend itself to be a body locker
Yeah.
or a What do you think of?
Well, I don't think of any of that anymore, man. Like I
Mhm.
honestly, and I'm gonna please don't let anything I say be that I'm being disparaging. I have a very
Mhm.
specific philosophy of play,
Yes.
uh, but none of it has to do with loose, tight hips. I don't think of any of that anymore. The only thing that I think of is effect. What effect am I trying to produce over my opponent? And sometimes that requires being super close. Sometimes that requires being at a particular angle. So I don't like to use these, what I would consider arbitrary lines of analysis, like loose or tight passing, because the truth is tightness is relative. Looseness is relative. Loose to what? Tight to
Mhm.
what? Because if we think about just a physical level of control, just from a physical standpoint, the first thing that has to be exhibited for control to start to happen is closeness. And closeness can be analyzed down to my grip getting close enough to touch you versus
Mhm.
my whole body being close enough to hover over top of you. Then we can look at it as how close am I not only relative to you in this way, but relative to you in the floor. So then you realize that tightness is all there ever is. It's just how we look at what aspect of the body is exhibiting tightness
Mhm.
is the line of analysis that we use to determine what type of passing. So I just erase all that. I assume closeness is the initial proxy for control. So what I do is I center all my games around trying to produce closeness. So
Mhm.
closeness at different levels. So we really have two levels of closeness. We have closeness from me to you and closeness of me to you to the floor. And so I
Mhm.
try to center all my games around developing an understanding there. So an example would be something like this. We would constrain, let's say, passing in two major ways. We would say top player's job is to break connections, like go through the segmentation process, feet, knees, hips, and you can exist on any line that you want. Hands, shoulders, you can exist anywhere around the body. But at no time can you drop double knees down or can you use chest to chest contact. So
Mhm.
what this does is it constrains closeness as just me to them, not me to them to the floor. So I have to learn how to stay close without using my chest. So I can't actually hold them to the ground. So I
Mhm.
learned how to control just by going close to them. And just constraining like the chest to chest or the double knees down teaches people how to use that initial proxy, that initial closeness to exhibit control. But if I want them to, let's say, be tighter overall, then we would play like a hip access game where we would do the same thing. We would go through segmentation, feet, knees to hips, but the win is surrounding your opponent's hips. So that would require you to drop down to them and get tighter to them, like in the way that we're talking about me,
Mhm.
them, the floor. So those are two different ways. And so one you could analyze as loose and one you could analyze as tight. But either way, it's just they both require the player to learn how to get close to their opponent for to create different effects.
Right. Right. Yeah, that's interesting because for me, when I'm thinking of like sort of dialing into like a style of play, I'm gonna think of it as weird comparison, but it makes sense to me sometimes. So I think of like pro football, right?
Mhm.
There's teams that you know they run a smash mouth running offense. We don't have to practice all the plays that make up their playbook, but there's certain things that a smash mouth running team does really well, right? Just like how I think in my view sometimes with jiu-jitsu, there's certain things a passer who likes to pass outside does really well.
For
And
sure, for sure.
we can like game around that, not to elicit just that, but to like, I think like sometimes recognizing a style that they could be using or an approach, not necessarily a granular thing, but like knowing that, or yeah, you sort of see where I'm going. It's something we've been playing with a lot in the way like I think of how I want to present it. Cause I don't want to present positions or moves because I don't really find a lot of utility in that. But there's, ways people fight is what I want to
Right.
sort of show them. Like, this is a way people will fight. So let's play games or do practice activities that would sort of help you build skills if this is a way you wanted to fight or you were fighting someone who was trying to do these things. Like that's sort of where I come from when I talk about that idea and the way it reflects itself in practice.
Oh no, the idea sounds sound. I get what you mean. I
Mhm.
really do. My experience has been such that that comes out on its own. So I
Yeah.
really don't like to constrain style. I like the
Mhm.
style to be expressed by the individual. So this is the reason why we use so much variability. Let's say we're player to player and player to floor.
Mhm.
Then we'll create many different games where you have to explore that in many different ways. So when it's time to play the whole game, you will be attracted to the one that is most effective to you, or that feels the best to you, or that constrains you in whatever way your physical capabilities allow, your action capacities allow. So I even though people at my gym tend to have a similar style, it's almost accidental. It's like a
Mhm.
result of the room, not of what I'm telling them to do. Because we do so much
Right.
variation in approach. So again, I don't like
Mhm.
to constrain style. I personally just want to constrain style specifically. I'd like to let that be expressed on its own. But I
Mhm.
I, I coach what I consider to what we call physical certainty. So
Right.
the way that I analyze the game relative to immobility versus mobility, and then I take all our actions. How do the body engage physically as a system to either decrease mobility for our opponent or increase it for ourselves? And then I create games around that. And then whatever comes out, comes out. Whatever
Mhm.
stylistic methodologies come out, I let them be. As long as you're able to immobilize or stay mobile, we're good to go. So rather than
Mhm.
teach like to styles or to moves, I teach to my central concept. And that central concept is immobilization as it leads to strangulation and breaking. So
Mhm.
I let that be my guide for everything.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, I hear you. That's yeah, I see how you've sort of made it all really tight in that, which is great because then everything is a filter, not a filter, but yeah, it's a good course correction. I do want to ask you something with variability.
Yeah, for sure.
Um, One thing that I started doing a little more is what's your like in your average session, let's say foundations, let's say, right? Um, What does it look like in terms of how often do you like to have people switching partners or switching, that type of stuff? Because, I had a phase where for me, I love the idea of straight, like one partner for, when we're working on this whole engagement, get a lot of constant feedback. It's sort of enough ability for you to handle and, get used to. Whereas now I find myself being way on the other side. Like I want very little of that with the one partner and more variable touches within, a certain range of appropriate partners or things like that. How do you like to do that type of stuff? Like in terms of mixing up your room?
Well, for early players, I like to keep the variability centered around a one aspect of it. So typically we do one player with one player the whole class, and we
Hmm.
do lots of different situations. So
Yeah.
we let the situation express the variability, but the consistency is that you're with somebody that you already touched.
Hmm.
So there's a little bit of certainty there. I know this person, I've touched this person, I've been working with them all day. That kind of helps the problem solving process become a little more predictable or readable. And I
Yep.
think that's valuable for the newer player because it reduces some of that variability for them. And then they only focus on the variability present within the physical engagement of the game
Hmm.
itself. However,
Right.
I think another way you could do it I haven't experimented with this, but this would be an idea where is you switch partners every time, but you play the same 2 or 3 games all class. You don't change it. So what you let the game be the consistent part, but you let the body be the variable part.
Hmm.
And I think both are very interesting and I think would produce interesting effects. And so the way I think about my whole week is I think about the whole week. So Monday through Thursday is constrained. Each day you stay with that same person all day. But if you switch classes, or sorry, excuse me, we have 3 classes each day. For that one class, you're with that same person the whole class.
Right.
If you switch classes, you have to pick somebody else.
Mhm.
And then the next day, you can't pick the same people. You have to pick somebody else. And so we use different people all week because by the time Friday or Saturday comes, we're doing nothing but regular rounds. We're switching partners every time.
Yep.
So anyway, there's an increase in variability in my program as the week progresses.
Mhm.
Um, so we go from like hyper focus early in the week to like more variable focus by the end of the week.
Yeah.
But no, but anyway, yeah, I don't have any particular reason. I mean, I think you can do it 1,000 different ways, but I like to control the parameters of why behavior is happening a little more closely. So I know the effect of what it is that I'm manipulating.
Mm. Yeah, and yeah, so I was very much doing, same partner the whole session through a variety of different engagements for some time, and I found that was awesome. More recently, I started to play with more so of a base game. You and I will play it. I'll have straight time. You'll have straight time, right? Then
Okay.
you and I maybe we'll play it as more of a flip flop because I've been playing a lot more of the same game, but
Okay.
changing how we do it. So first
Okay.
time, straight time. Second time, you and I flip flop.
Okay.
Third time we go through it, I'm going to make a small group of 4 or 5.
I like that. Yeah.
But the first 4 or 5 group is based on weight, and then I do another iteration where now it's based on skill. So now you go into so it's been very interesting because I allow them to start sort of stable, one partner, straight time, and then they get to play with that same partner, but now the outcome has teeth, right? Because you flip flop every time. And then I like to move, okay, from there now to people of a similar size, right? Playing a similar game. Maybe we've expanded or changed the scope a little, and then to, all the similar skilled players in the room. It's been really interesting. And it's been really nice for me to not like, I just find everyone's gotten so many more unique touches that they're really centered on what's more. Because sometimes you can game a partner,
Oh,
just a partner. You know, you
being
don't
a
like,
partner. All
when I
yeah.
push you this way, I know this guy caves.
Yeah.
And it's
100%.
been super cool to see them like it gets rid of so many false positives, I find for my guys. Because they
Yeah.
go through it in like a really good progression. It's just been what I've been playing with. And
No,
like
I like it.
the athletes really enjoy it. So like obviously that's a tick, right? Like that matters. They are engaged, whatever. But like seeing it sort of scale up in the variability, I like that. I think so far it's been like really, really interesting.
Well, I think it's interesting. I think it really gets them to hyper focus on the task constraint. So rather than switch the
Mhm,
task, you're
mhm,
constraining the individual constraints. I like that. See,
mhm,
I'm particularly obsessed with task constraint. I
mhm.
don't know why. Like, I just I'm obsessed with the philosophy behind the game, the physics behind the game.
Oh
So
yeah.
I, as a coach, highlight that. Like that's just my personal obsession. But I
Mhm,
like how you're trying to get that letting the individual constraint guide what's happening in the game. I haven't hyper focused on that ever. So
mhm.
that's sparking my interest right now, man. So
Yeah.
and it's interesting you pick those things because we do a little like let's talk about how we do our weekly variation. So
Mhm,
general rule, same partner all class. You have to switch partners per class per day. Great. Each day we'll focus on, let's say, a theme. Let's say this week we're focusing like hip centric themes where we're doing standing engagement starting off. We're making connections around the hips wins is the objective, and the task constraints will be variable. And then the next game would be like standing player, seated player, hip access for both players wins the game. And then we'll do chest to chest pinning all the way to submission where we're starting with hip access. And so, like, let's say hip and hip centric starting point
mhm,
or win condition is spread throughout each game. Now, the
mhm.
next day, we'll do those same situations, but the constraints will change slightly. We'll either add more people, like groups of 3 we've been doing,
Mhm.
or winner stays in as long as they continue winning the engagement. Um, and so each day we keep the same situation, but we manipulate the variables within the situation. Uh, just like you sort of have done, let's say with one round, it'll be like fulfill the condition.
Mhm.
Next round, it'll be flip flop. Next round will be equal time. Then you'll change partners and you'll do groups. So we do that throughout the week rather than a
Mhm.
single day. So where I'm doing the same manipulations, but as the day unfolds, not so much like I said,
Right.
Monday might be playable conditions only. Tuesday might be terminal conditions only.
Mhm.
Third day might be groups of three. You
Yep.
know what I mean? Yeah.
Yeah. And like, one thing is like, it sounds like you're pretty loose with it too. I try and be loose too, because if I see today, like today, it won't make a difference. It won't be a valuable touch for me to turn this into small group play. They
Yes.
need maybe a new game with a new task. That's
Yep.
the better, that's another thing, just not evolving, but as I've continued, like, man, I used to be very prescriptive. Now I have start points. What
Yeah.
is
Yeah.
the start point of this standing engagement we want to focus on? What is the start point of this guard engagement we want to focus? And I use like, my first game is a diagnostic oftentimes.
Yeah. Me too. Me too.
I think of it like you've never played Street Fighter before, so I'm just handing you the controller, you're fucking around. Let's see if you can block shit, bro. And then let's make it complex. Like I always think of like that's my starting point, like first game is just hold this controller and do something useful, and then
Yeah.
right. And then I have to see what do we need to focus on. But
Yeah.
I can see it being daunting, but like truly now it's way more fun for me as a coach. I'm
Uh,
always engaged in their development.
Well, that's our job, right? So
Mhm,
the fact that it is more daunting actually makes you engage more. So the job becomes a little more complex because now you're realizing how much you're actually dealing with. So what's
mhm,
interesting, it loosens our view on outcome. So we're like, all right, fuck outcome. Okay, we'll just use
yep,
that as another data point. But how are we going to manipulate changing that outcome? You know, the things we have to be paying attention to are massive. So I love it. And it's really cool to hear how much you've invested in this process. I've talked to a lot of people and I still have people just calling me and wanting to talk to me, asking me about games. And I'm like, fuck, man. But listening to you and hearing how deep you've gone with it, how much you've played with all the central ideas, and that's so cool. Makes me feel happy and excited.
well, that's why I thought it would be fun to have like this type of conversation. Cause like it's totally different, I think. It's fun for us to be able to just, what are you trying? And error, because we have to trial and error. Just like, it's the game, it's
Yeah.
how we're gonna make our room better, how we yeah.
And
So it's
nobody,
yeah.
what's funny is like all the questions you asked me today, nobody is deep enough in it to even ask me these questions. So all these things that you're talking about, like I've either explored or I've thought about exploring or, they're in my notes, but it's rare that I get to talk to somebody else who's in that
Mhm,
space too. I have another coach of mine, Josh Reed, and he and I talk like you and I are talking now once a week. We talk once a week. We talk about game design. We talk about how the practices went. We talk about the issues we ran into, how we could probably troubleshoot to fix the issues that we're running into. But other than him, shit, I don't talk to anyone at that level. So
yeah.
it's really cool to hear you do this. One thing, if you don't mind, I'll bring up
Yeah, yeah,
something that's
please.
been kind of frustrating to me is so have you noticed I'm not on the Discord,
Mhm,
and part of the reason I'm not in the Discord is exactly kind of what we're talking about here. Like this failure to commit to the central ideas and only to attach to the novelty of the idea and
mhm,
try to use it as a replacement for a technique has been something that I think is ruining our message a little bit.
yeah.
And one of the things that I've seen that's been bothering me about practice is people adding objects to practice, like
Ah, get
holding
the poker
balls to
chips away,
grapple,
dog.
the
I
poker
hate the
chips.
poker chips.
No, I was thinking about this today, actually. It came up because I did a little video. I analyzed your practice, by the way, if you want to talk about that. I did that today.
Oh, yeah,
Uh,
yeah, that's funny.
yeah.
That's all I don't even remember what I sent you now.
Oh, it was actually not, it was actually good. So I'll tell
Yeah,
you
I don't even remember now, but that's
I'll
funny.
I'll tell you my analysis of the game in a second. But you realize that when in sports like baseball, right, where you're trying to change the way your elbow leaves your body when you're throwing a ball, we don't have a control parameter that really helps us focus on where that elbow is. So by putting a bag under your arm, for example, and throwing it, you can see where the bag goes as a relationship with how you're holding it and where your elbow is. So this is a very critical constraint for getting people's elbow to be in the correct position. Or maybe putting a little ramp under a pitcher's foot. So when they step, they have to step in a specific way. This is important because again, they don't have anything interacting with their body to help them like change limb position,
Mhm.
change delivery times. But when we're grappling, we have another body. Like our
Yeah.
our partner's body is the control parameter. So if I'm practicing chest to back contact, for example, and I'm trying to improve at it, I don't have to put a poker chip between me and them because the result of me losing their back is the equivalent of losing the poker chip. And what's even worse about the poker chip is it acts like training wheels. So it's actually a decoupling agent because now you're not worried
Yeah.
about the effect you're having on your opponent. You're worried about whether you're keeping the poker chip close enough or not. And there's no relationship between closest of poker chip and ability to keep your chest on your partner's back. So it's just a misunderstanding of the science because you've been blinded by novelty, you
Mhm.
know? And I was seeing it for the tennis balls too. Like there could be an argument for holding tennis balls for a very elite player who's, say, for example, not using their elbows to
Mhm.
make, do more of the control. So you want to take away their hands. So they have to use their elbow pressure, for example. But with
Mhm.
new players, they don't even know where to put their hands yet. Sorry, I got to rant for a second. I was just talking about
Yeah.
this today.
Do it. I
I
love it.
It's bugging me. It's bugging me. I'm like, how are these guys? How did they get there? You know? So yeah, I think
Yeah.
we need to exhaust our opponent's body as the main control parameter before we start adding in objects.
See, and sometimes I think that the does not design, but we add in the objects because, like, it seems like it's a faster way to bring it to someone's attention, but truthfully, we're just distracting them from what they should really be paying
I
attention to, is
I
how I
completely
feel about all
no,
of
I
that, all
completely agree.
I have a like, I might as well have just told you a confusing thing before this and had you try and do it. Like, why not just do that then? Like, not that it's that bad, but
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
it's really distracting.
For sure,
'Cause
for
I'm
sure.
not putting you in a way that would pin you. I'm just keeping this here on you,
Yeah.
this little yeah, I'm not into it. Plus, like, I don't wanna deal with setup time. There's a human right here, just touch him. Just fucking grab this human.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
you can see if you can fit in that gap, bro. Like
No, exactly right. Yeah, it just, bugged the shit out of me because, I had to analyze a guy's video this morning, and he does poker chips and balls and stuff. And it's funny, it's surprising because I had to analyze his game, and the games he gave me were pretty terrible, and they were terrible because they were just situational sparring, and that's fine. Situational sparring is a tool that we used, but
mhm,
it's not constraints led, not in a way where we're manipulating, let's say, task constraint or environmental constraints or
mhm,
individual constraints. Really, we're not really manipulating anything. So it's just it would be like start in the triangle, submit your partner with chokes and arm locks. That's situational sparring, man. Like, that's not anything. So even at a fundamental level, trying to manipulate the game itself, the guy wasn't good at. So you want to go ahead and add a poker chip or a ball, but you can't manipulate the game itself. Man,
mhm.
you're putting the cart before the horse here, pal. So
Yeah. Yeah, it's but, like, trying, I guess, trying to dabble, I'm always down, but it just seemed like, there's a simpler way. Like,
well,
I understand we're trying to make a simple way because, like, ooh, now there's tactile feedback, but bro, like you said, there's humans. There's humans right there.
I'm not trying to be an asshole by being overly critical. I actually don't think that is trying. I think that's
Mm,
not trying because
hmm,
uh, the thing is the first thing that I tried to do is use what's already there. So I had to maximize what's in front of me. And I didn't understand the science when I first started reading it. I didn't understand what they were trying to say. So rather than jump on the most flashy thing, I just like, let's take as much away as I can and try to use
mhm,
just a little bit. Because the first thing you should try to do is understand, not just say, oh, I get it. Add poker chips, we're good.
mhm.
I think the lazy man play into it. So
Well, it's interesting. It's like, again, weird. Think of like, you know, fitness. It's like you do the training, you can buy the supplements. People
I
love
think you just
product
you read my mind.
over service, bro. Like
You
I
fucking read
rather
my
just
mind.
think that does it, but
Yeah.
like I always think of that with that. It's like, you can't just do that. You can't just yeah, you can, but like you can't a little bit, and I get it. It's yeah, that's funny. That's the same thought. Yeah, I always think the same way. Like all
Yeah, it's like, I wanna get in shape, so I gotta buy a Peloton first. It's like,
yep.
have you
Yeah,
even
the
been
product
outside
is the
today?
easy thing, It's easy to buy. That's why people want your games course, dog. Why
Yeah.
don't you give me the easy one
Uh,
that I
you know
can
what's
then
funny?
immediately ignore?
We've been filming and filming, and we've done so many iterations of, how I wanna put this out. We keep scrapping it because what you realize is that no matter how you go about doing it, you're just doing the same thing as technique. Like,
Mhm,
I think what we've ultimately come to is we're gonna create a course to get started, just to get started. So you can have a tool to start to understand variability. So you can have a
mhm,
tool to understand how to make your students immune to novelty and manipulate novelty, but not as like the end all be all. Like start here and then use these tools and learn how to use them on your own, like as you progress forward. So this is the model that we're focusing on now. But It's been hard, man. I've been stressing the fuck out, like, because I want to give a really good product that's quality controlled, that is being honest.
Mhm.
And it's hard to sell this shit unless you're bullshitting. You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
I mean, how dare you try to teach a man to fish? You know, no one wants that in this day and age. The audacity.
It's crazy, man. But yeah, let's talk about your game real quick because that's just fresh in my mind.
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. What was it?
Yes.
Was it a standing game? Guard
Yep.
game? What was it?
Standing game. You had one player start with inside ties. So you had like a collar tie and inside bicep ties where you had one
Uh-huh.
player start, and their job was to control distance, to keep their connections on the inside. The defending player's job, or excuse me, the progressing player's job was to break the connections and try to get in between the elbows so they could connect their hands, or get outside the elbows so they could connect their hands.
Mm, mhm.
Now, I thought your game design was great. So that idea is, I think, is really cool. Give one player, man, stay inside, keep your hands on your partner. Don't let them remove your hands. What other player remove hands and try to use the removal to get in between your outside to get close and close your hands. Great, great stuff.
Mhm.
I thought where, I said this on your video, we're going to put this out, I think, a couple days,
Cool.
but just the language. So, so the physical description and the idea behind the game I thought was money, but the way you delivered it was options. Like, oh, you could do this, you could do this, you might want to look for this. I think that more direct language, like, what do you want them to do? Inside guy, stay here. If you lose inside, get back to inside. Other guy, remove connections, get closer, close your hands. Just give it to them straight up. Like,
Mhm.
no, this could, maybe that, nothing like that.
Oh,
Just,
yeah, because I think I was showing, like, you might clear it to get outside the
yeah, yeah, yeah,
elbow, you might pop up to get in, right? Is that sort of what happened, if I'm recalling?
absolutely. Now,
Where
don't
I
be afraid to give them a physical example. So one of the issues that I'm having right now is people are misunderstanding me when I say I don't teach my student techniques and they won't demonstrate anything. Demonstration is important because we use our eyes to pick up information. So when my coach is talking about being outside the elbow, I need to know what he means by that. So
Mhm.
by showing outside the elbow, this could enhance their perception of what you're asking them to do. So, like I said, your demonstrations I thought were great. I like how you and your partner both demonstrated what you wanted the starting situation to be, what you wanted the outcome to be, and what inside and outside meant. But talking through the options, I think that
Mhm.
gets a little nebulous
Mhm.
and confusing.
100%. I would likely agree. Yeah, that's cool, yeah. Totally forgot. I was like, "Oh, yeah, I forgot I just threw that in that chat with me posted," 'cause, like, I have video of every class, and I watch shit all the time, and I was just,
Yeah.
like, watching that game. I was like, "Oh, dude, I'll just cut this right now. Drop it in there. Why not?"
No, it was good. I love it because I said, and I think the language is something we're always messing with because as coaches, that's kind of our medium for the conveyance of information. And I think, that's the hardest thing to do because you're always talking to different people for different reasons. So trying to come up with very clarifying language has been my obsession anyway, because I can't stand listening to myself. So when I do, I go back and I fucking rip it apart to try to be more clear at what I mean. So yeah,
Well, language is like the big multiplier, right? If I can be really efficient with my language, it can mean a lot of things. You can unpack it. There can be depth to the communication without me having to distract you or waste your time or other things. Like, what is the core message that's most important to have the communication in this? Like, that I find is the skill. I'm always going, man, did I say too much? I wish I said less, or I wish I would mostly cued this than that, or, like, not cued that particular, not being that particular. You know what I mean? Like,
for sure,
that's
for sure.
always the challenge, like, did I use that moment of influence to really bang it out the park, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, I think about that too. I used to, so I use constraints on myself as a coach.
Mhm.
So, like time was one I used a lot. I used to put time on my phone. I used to put 90 seconds and I
Yep.
had to get the message out in 90 seconds. And so if I missed, I was, okay, how can I say that simply? How can I say that more simply? How can I still
Mhm.
convey the message? Now it's such that I always fall within the 90-second range without even timing myself anymore. You know what I mean? So I was
Yep.
telling someone this and they didn't believe me. They were visiting the gym. Like, I'm going to put a timer on. I was like, go. I fucking hit almost 90 seconds every single time. It was like, 132, 135, 127. I was like, I told you, motherfucker, I used to practice this shit.
Yeah. Yeah. Amazing. Yeah, because it's funny though, because we have to, like, when you really wanna coach, you're like, "Fuck, I have to care about my words now? I thought I just had to be a barbarian, bend your arm behind your back, bro.
That's
I
it.
thought that's all this took."
Well, now since we use the ecological approach, we're eco bros now. So
Uh,
we just let them figure it out. We don't have to do anything. You just let them figure it out, bro. It's that
yeah.
easy.
I'm just in the DMs on the side now. I don't even coach, bro.
Yeah,
What's
yeah,
wrong with that?
yeah. You can't figure it out yourself? Fuck.
Yeah. Yo, actually, I have something curious. I would be curious to see if you've changed sort of what you did. At one point, I remember you didn't really do much of the standing engagement with your foundations.
Yeah, still don't.
I've now made it a part of every session. It's a short project, a short experiment, probably 6 to 7 weeks, but it's been awesome because it has never been to the floor. So, like that game that I showed you, like
Mhm.
I'm doing that stuff every day now, and it's been really interesting because like before I avoided the same engagement for I think like the normal reasons I would think, hey, people have to opt in to getting smashed. Totally fine. But I realized by just focusing on the entries and connection stuff, I get to teach so much
Yeah.
of what happens on the ground in other engagements in this engagement, which is sort of simple for humans to understand.
Yeah.
When we're, you know what I mean? So like I've added it into every session, partly for that, and partly now I don't have to worry an open mat if these two white belts want to wrestle. They know they've moved, fought for good, initial positions. But I've really, really liked it because of that benefit of them like understanding head position as being a line of defense, not just on your feet. It's in half guard it applies, or it applies to, like so we've added into every session. Do you still not really play with much standing engagement in
Yeah. So
foundation? Or where are you
now,
at now with that?
well, now you're making me fucking, you're about to accept your challenge and do that shit tonight.
Let's go.
No, so at 7 o'clock we do. So 6 to 7 is still a typical thing. We do
Mhm.
three games. So now, but I did take 3 minutes out. I don't do anything 3 minutes anymore. Everything we do in the foundations is 6 minutes, and it's always flip flopping top to bottom.
Right.
This over the last couple of months this has been huge. It allows
Mhm,
more time for exploration. I'm not so nervous about their fatigue. I'm designing games better so that they're not so fatigued. So the 6 minutes
mhm,
is nothing now, and it's been great. The class feels more cohesive, and it's great. But no, it's still three initial games from one situation, and then two games from previous situations, from previous lessons, and
mhm,
then a regular round. That's been my foundations class for as long as I can remember. 7 o'clock now is standing engagement first. So
mhm.
we've been doing either connected to destabilization or disconnected to connected or some combination of the two
Yep.
as the first game. Second game is guarded. Third game is chest, chest. Fourth game is chest to back. I mean, and I say that loosely, but that's what I'm doing now. And then eight to nine is all standing engagement. Uh,
Mhm.
and so that's how my program's running right now. But now you make me want to just take one of those games in the first class and make it standing.
Man, I've loved it, and people love it because, like I always say, "Hey, cool, I wanna make people awesome at jujitsu for sure," right? Although there's needs that we wanna try and hit for a student, and, like, one need that I don't hit or, like, I always felt like I don't hit is, if you come for self-defense and you never have
That's
another
true.
person shove you around on your feet. That's the most basic form of self-defense I could give anyone.
You're
Be
100%
comfortable
right.
standing up with another person touching you while you're standing up. So that was the other reason, like, man, I think it does sort of have to be in there, even for that,
Yeah,
you know? And like
I
just
agree.
wow. Yeah. So that was sort of what moved me to like, man, maybe I'm gonna try and like the way we've been playing it, it's all been sort of what you've been doing, it's either entries or we'll even start them in rear body locks, but like all you can do is foot locks to try and put their hand on the mat.
Yeah, yeah,
We're
great.
not
Yeah,
putting people to their hip, but it's been really good. Or we'll start like standing with like a single leg cross hip already. Just keep it. We're just keeping it. Nothing made like, it's
yeah.
been really good. And I was just curious if you'd played around, but cool. I like to know. Yeah, see, this is why I like this type of conversation because we're doing shit, we're trying shit, and I like to just know why you think of certain things, or I'm playing with whatever.
Yeah,
For
no,
sure.
I really like it. I wanna do it. So I'm also, really obsessed with the holistic approach. So there are some arbitrary rules I've made for my classes, some arbitrary rules that I've made for myself, and I sometimes I have a hard time separating from them, just because I see this picture that I want things to go towards, and this could be
Mhm.
my weakness as a coach. Um, and I would love to do that with new guys. So I think your point about being comfortable on the feet, being crucial to self-defense situation, people come to that. Don't ever let anyone tell you otherwise. I think you're 100% right. Uh, but now, yeah, I feel challenged. But at the same time, it's like, but because the nature of the way we do our class, our training is so intense,
Mhm.
with the way our gym culture is, I could leave it out because we always do standing engagement every night. So if a student felt inclined to challenge themselves and come to the next class, they would still get it anyway. But if the student just was not inclined to accept that challenge. They still have a class where they're safe from it. So I don't know. I'd have to kind of reorient
Yeah.
how I organize things, but I think you're right
Yeah.
to do it.
Yeah. For me, I was like, how can I still make like just a little bit of exposure? Because I know I probably wouldn't want to fall down unless I opt in all the way.
Yeah,
Like I
yeah.
can understand people wanting to have an opt in to that. So it's like you almost get to not opt into that, but you might have to put your hand on the floor. Okay,
Yeah,
that's
yeah,
as
yeah.
far as I'll throw you right now. You might have to put your hand on the floor because you're falling over. That's it. Or
Well,
whatever.
even in the second class, when we start this, we always go towards the hands. That's the safest way the body falls. And that's
Yep.
a great way to get people used to falling without freaking out. And also guiding the attacker not to do something crazy, like fall backwards behind their opponent and snap their knees and stuff.
Mhm.
Because
Yeah.
I've seen that happen way too many times. And
Oh, I hate that one.
oh, it's
Yeah.
terrible, man. Like at Lloyd's, I remember one time was particularly bad. These two guys, they were like above 200, and one guy body locked the other one and just ripped him backwards. And the guy ended up he broke both his tibia and his fibia. He
Mm.
dislocated his knee, tore every ligament. I mean, his leg
Oh,
didn't look like a leg. It was the worst thing I'd ever seen.
damn.
We had to call the ambulance. They come get him. It was horrific. He had to have all
Oof.
kinds of reconstructive surgery. So
Yeah. Yeah. Ooh. Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that's why people are like, man, maybe I shouldn't fuck around with stand up.
Oh yeah, no. So
Or
it's not
Al for accounting. Maybe he doesn't need that in his life.
Yeah,
Well,
I mean, the thing is that it's not really the stand up itself, honestly. It's just how it's constrained, how it's talked about, how it's
yep.
guided, because that's what makes live resistance safe is constraints. So as long as you're constraining it so that that random crazy action doesn't happen, man, you're good to go. So
Yeah.
everyone they complain, oh, why live resistance? Why intensity? Dude, intensity is relative. All the crazy things you think are happening is because you haven't constrained yourself as a coach to learn how to use live resistance as your main method for creating practice.
Mhm.
Once you do, you're good to go, man. It's as safe as anything else.
Yo, you're still on like the zero injury train, right? Because I
0.
still am. I never have that shit ever like,
Y
yeah.
y
No.
Kabir, dude, we have, 4 classes a day, all live rolling, and I am an intense guy, and my intensity comes out in my practice, right? I urge my guys to be competitive. I urge my guys to win, and with the small stuff, like, let's say we're doing I'm not gonna fall down. You have to make me fall down. Man, don't fall down. Don't fall down. Like I hype the room up, you know?
Mhm.
And so even in the face of all that, nobody ever gets hurt. The only
Yeah.
kind of hurt we have are literally overuse. Like a guy did, arm lock training for 4 weeks in a row. And so, okay, coach, my elbow's a little bit sore. But
Yeah.
yeah, no injuries, man. We don't get any.
I still yeah, it's amazing. And I think it's like, one thing I've always noticed is like, man, I don't worry about my weight belts blowing each other's arms off because they've already touched a fully extended arm, right?
100%.
I sort of
100%.
think the same thing now in the stand up for my
Uh,
beginner, putting you in the dominant standing position, a standing rear body lock or a standing single. And it's not the first time you've ever been there. And this person's not freaking out. And I think it has that similar effect, let's say, you know?
yeah.
If you never touch it when you see, like, like whatever. But if you're always touching, like, and it's nothing, you're behind people often. You have this big advantage often. That's the other reason I've been trying to layer it in because the two injuries happen at the ends of the spectrum, right? From feet to floor, or when there's a limb and extension, or in that, so like, how can I get them touches there to be safe too?
No, I think you're right, man. I think that initial exposure is a safety protocol. You know
Mhm.
what I mean? I mean, exposure is the best medicine against fear, right? So expose somebody, you reduce that
Yo,
fear. Yeah.
I have a question. Do you
Yeah.
ever to break fall, bro? I haven't taught a break fall
Kabir.
in a while. Like, I
I
can't imagine why. Like, it's so funny though, because like, think of back in the day, you had to teach someone that, or you were literally giving them a death sentence. Is what we thought. That's
yeah,
what I
yeah.
thought. Like, if
Yeah,
I
me
don't
too.
teach the guy how to break fall, he's gonna have a brain injury. His family's homeless. Like, that's where it goes. It's so important that. But like, I don't know. I haven't taught it and haven't had anyone get fucked.
I haven't taught I haven't had warm-ups in my program or
Yeah.
mat drills since I was a purple belt. The last time I did any of that is when I was teaching for a satellite school for Lloyd. Or I might have I taught for Ryan Hall for a year, so I taught for Ryan
Mhm.
Hall from 2013 to 2014, that whole year. So I might have done it then, but the second I opened my doors, we have not had a warm-up nor mat drills since I opened. So That
And
was
it
10
literally made no difference. Like, that's the
0
thing.
difference. None.
And that's the thing. I'm like, man, it's so hilarious. And I saw people like, are you sure we shouldn't like stop those white belts and show them how to break fall? I'm like, I don't think so. They just need to know, like, don't dome yourself. You're good.
Yeah,
You
yeah,
know?
yeah. Well, actually, I think that the safety of delivery has more to do with the thrower than the receiver or the
Oh,
take
yeah.
yeah,
Yep.
the progressive player.
Yeah.
Um, it's funny, all the stuff that people like, "Oh, do you teach breakfalls? Do you do warm-ups?" So I
Mhm.
just listened to a talk with Ian Renshaw and a few other,
Mhm.
eco psych guys, and Ian Renshaw doesn't believe in warm-ups. He's
Yeah.
like, "It's not real." He said something interesting though, because, and I was talking actually Scott Sabright about this,
Mhm.
is I noticed that every day that you start practice, your first round's always your worst. And so I had this idea that what happens overnight is like a de-attunement process. So when you step away, you detune from the information, and then when you revisit it the next day or the other, 2 days, 3 days from now, whatever, you have to re-attune to grabbing bodies and moving at that pace in that way. And because this it seems like as I watch my class, no matter how good the player is, that first round of the day, that first exchange always looks like shit. And even with
Mhm.
me, I always feel a little bit notchy that first round. And it's not because my heart rate's not up. It's not because anything like that. It's literally I haven't touched a body in 24 hours or 48 hours.
Mhm.
Ian Renshaw said the same shit. He was saying what he thinks warming up is for a skill anyway, is a reattunement to the environment that, you know, you left 24 hours
Yep.
ago. Um, and he said something interesting, and this has been in my mind since. He said, if you had to win your sport in 1 minute just by showing up and going, could you? And I've been
Mhm.
like, man, that's very interesting to me. So I've been practicing something personally right when I start my round, first round of every day that I do, or anytime I do a regular round, I go right away towards something. I have an intention and I try to go after it as hard as I can for the first minute. And I don't mean hard like sloppy.
Mhm.
I just mean that I try to attune to that one thing immediately. Can I accomplish this task in 1 minute without warming up? Uh, and even that thought has been a great improvement for me, and as far as how the rest of my round goes. But anyway, that's my. They don't exist. They're not real.
Yeah. It's just so funny. Like, think of all, like, I had like sometimes I'll have students like, yo, I remember when I trained at this other place, they taught us a forward shrimp. What do you use a forward shrimp for? I'm like, bro, they made you do it and didn't tell you even a use case.
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
the other thing that like blows my mind is you'll make a person do something and not even like even fucking melts my brain, bro.
Check this out. Here's another thing that melts your brain. One of our brown belts went to a school. I'm not going to name it because it's a famous school and everyone knows it. But he went to it and he said, the guy teaching, also a famous guy, was like, okay, here at this school, we teach using concepts. And he said, then we spent the next 45 minutes showing it. He explicitly describing how to do a move. Like, and he said it was crazy. They did so much drilling. They ran around the mat. They did all this nonsense. But the guy started the class with, here at this
Mhm.
school, we teach concepts, not moves. And he said, it's like, okay, I guess that's what you think you do. So the other day
Yeah.
I posted a meme. It's like, everyone thinks they're gangster until concepts become things. It's like, yeah,
Oh no. Yeah. Man. Um, what else is going on? Do you want to wrap here? This was very fun. I like this. This is
hell
like
yeah,
a good
man.
weekend. I could talk about training and jujitsu shit forever, but I think we're a solid hour deep. We
Yeah,
can
yeah.
go.
And I think you're planning on sharing this with like a Discord or something, or
Yeah, I don't know. So,
yeah, just
like,
see if anyone wants to listen to this bullshit.
people do feverishly, I would say. So, yeah, man, people love us. We're so lovable.
Yeah,
No, that's my favorite.
especially me.
Yeah,
So
you're like the
here,
people crown.
here's what I like is that when I first came out, people were like, "Yo, I want to talk to Kabir because fuck Greg Souders. Kabir's better." You know what I mean? And I totally get it. I'm like, "Yo, I came out kind of hot," and people were like,
Yeah. Oh man, that's funny.
And it's interesting. I
Um,
feel like you and I conversations from the very first one we ever had to when we saw each other at Worlds, we met for the first time, and every conversation we've had in between have been perfectly smooth and easy. So for two people who supposedly are personality opposites, I feel like we get along wonderfully.
it's just because we both did work, and you
That
just think people don't do work, and I'll let him. I'll let him be. That's all. I'll let him be.
Yeah,
You
yeah,
don't let him be.
that's true. That's true.
Yeah. But yeah, I'm thinking I'll just like I might just post on like YouTube so it's easy. People
Okay.
you can hear people because I think this is like for people who actually care about coaching. I think this is a very interesting conversation. I don't
Yeah.
think it's an interesting thing for like a generic podcast, maybe all the time,
Okay.
you know, like not everyone, but I think there's people who engage that you would feel the same. I think people will want to check this out.
Yeah. Well, you have my permission to put it wherever you want. And,
Oh,
if you ever have any ideas to do this again in any other way, I'll chat with you anytime.